You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All right, and welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and I am joined, as always, by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. Guys, how are we doing tonight?
Doing real good. Finishing up a work dynasty auction draft. The league is kind of in its second year right now, so working on that here currently. So I promise I'm not ignoring you guys, but if I don't get my bid in, I don't get my roster that I want. So we're multitasking here tonight, fellas. But other than that, good. Lots of news coming out. Lots of takes from camp. Saquon coming off the PUP list. Made everybody in the Northeast go, ooh, like you might actually have a chance to play come week one. All the different things going on with COVID-19 vaccinations and testings and all the fallouts through camp, and some really pissed off coaches, which is always entertaining to watch their little clips. But overall, hey, we're getting squared up here, guys. It's preseason football time, and we're ready to rock and roll.
Absolutely. And we're joined by a very special guest tonight. We've got Smitty1 coming to us. He's from the Fantasy Football Show. You can find him, Smitty1 on the Twitters and several of the other socials. And he's also got the Smitty1.com. How you doing tonight?
I'm good, man. Appreciate you guys having me on, and I'm ready to talk a little football.
Absolutely. This one is going to be a blast. We've got a lot of really good things coming to you. We've got a whole lot of stuff to kind of get into as we start getting there. But last team of the season to break down, and that's the Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Before we get there, though, we're gonna talk to Smitty a little bit, like we do with all the folks that we bring on. We always like to get some of the backstory behind it and kind of see how some of the stuff they're working on, some of the stuff that, how they got their start. And that's kind of where we'll start this one off with is Smitty. So, you've been doing fantasy football for a while. Can you tell us kind of how you got your start in the space?
Yeah. I mean, other than like Matthew Berry and a few others, I'm a dinosaur. I've been here as long as anybody. 19 years professionally. This is what I do. And I got my start on NBC Sports Radio. And I've been on, and it's probably going to end this year, unfortunately, but been on the world's longest fantasy football radio show. And it's been on NBC and CBS. It's bounced back and forth over the 23 years that it's been going. I've been a part of it 19. And COVID is taking out everything. But this one in particular was it's based out of a local sports bar here in Phoenix. And just so happens, with places going under and such, that this particular show that was been powered for 23 years by a group of people is probably not going to happen anymore. So that reign will end. But I got my start 19 years ago, dropping bold predictions on NBC Sports Radio, and I've done that show ever since, nonstop. And I got into the space at that point. You can find everything that I have at Smitty1.com. It's my rankings, my text device, my bold predictions, all that stuff. But yeah, man, I've been doing this for as long as anybody, inventing tools that weren't here before I got here. First instant based trade calculator, invented that in 2003. Just been innovating and doing what I can to create a type of fantasy football environment that isn't there currently. And that's my goal, innovation.
That's awesome. And kudos to you for the longevity and sticking it out. And some things are meant to last, and some things there's when a door shuts or when a window shuts, a door opens, is what the saying is, right? So obviously, best of luck to you guys as your next venture comes forward. But over this past 19 years or so, what's something that really sticks out to you? Is kind of a I don't know if it's a shining moment that I'm trying to say, but something that fantasy relevance kind of sticks out in your head is, hey, this was my moment that I just got to kind of stand on top of the world and scream, I told y'all, you didn't listen.
There's so many. What I'm known for, the bold predictions, the bold takes, and obviously I wouldn't be doing what I do now 19 years in if I wasn't, accurate with those things. Sometimes you have big years, sometimes you miss a ton. Every one of us have misses every single year. So, I take those losses and I talk about them. I don't try and hide them. I loved Kenyon Drake last year. I thought that he was a very high risk, potentially high risk, high reward player. They don't always work out, but I have DK and AJ Brown and other things that landed too. So I don't run for my misses, but some of the boldest stuff I think that I've landed, quarterbacks, I'm really good. That's my wheelhouse for predicting the next elite guys. I predicted Mahomes to be a top 1 to 5 guy on the NBC, it was CBS Sports Radio then, on CBS Sports Radio when he wasn't even starting. It was Alex Smith. It was about October, I think, and Alex Smith was going crazy. He was like a top 5 fantasy football quarterback through like October. It was madness, and everyone's like, Mahomes, who? We don't need this guy we drafted. So things like that stand out as some of my bigger calls, but. I'm not much about looking in the past. I'm much about looking forward. So the Fantasy Football Show is my YouTube channel, and it's only 2.5 years in. So we're entering year 3. So entering year 3, 2 years in the books. I've been acquired a couple times through my career, and so this is essentially my start over point, branching back out on my own. And so that's what the Fantasy Football Show is all about. And man, everything I do is trying to bring, like I said, a new way of looking at fantasy football, a different way of breaking it down. I have a psych degree, so I use a lot of psychology in fantasy football with a lot of my content, and just try and bring different perspectives to it. So I would say the innovation parts are more important to me than like the bold predictions or the calls. It's like being the first to bring a fantasy football instant trade calculator to the market, being one of the first, if not the first, but at least one of the first, because there were people toying around with the idea in some way, shape, or form, but the first automated draft simulator in 2003. So those things are very I think good accomplishments because they help evolve the game. And I've been doing it since you couldn't even get like a PayPal account to take a fantasy football transaction. That's how long I've been in the space. Like, it was frowned upon. You'd have to find some crazy gateway, payment gateway to use for your fantasy football content because nobody wanted to deal with you. You were completely like casted out from the real world. That's how long I've been to be a part of evolving fantasy football into relevancy and acceptance by NFL.com and the teams. It's been a great journey, and I think I'm more proud of that stuff.
Yeah, I think it wasn't that long ago, and I think we might all forget about that fantasy football was like considered a form of gambling almost. And it's not gambling if you're doing it right. I can tell you that much. Sometimes I take gambles. But Smitty, I wanted to ask you, I know you just said, I don't like to look in the past. I like to look towards the future, but I am going to ask you to look into the past here. We all have that one guy that, maybe we rode him to a championship or whatever. Who is your one guy from all of your years of fantasy football that is like, he holds a soft spot in your heart because of what he meant to your team in that particular season or seasons?
Probably Priest Holmes. I think that's the one guy that comes to mind for me because that's what really that really got me. Once I landed a Holmes and Warner prediction, Kurt Warner is another one. Kurt Warner, Mahomes. Those are the ones that like really got me even further embedded in fantasy football prediction, in the prediction business. Just trying to find those next guys, evaluating talent. I'm a very gut driven guy. Believe me, I have a lot of stats. I'm not one of those analysts that just starts spouting off, stuff without substance, but I crank out a lot of stat driven stuff, but I'm a very gut oriented predictor as well. Half of what I do is probably gut driven, stuff that you can't be like, how can you say that? Well, I can say it because my gut's telling me to say it. Like try and take that away from me. You can't take that away from me. When my gut tells me something's going to happen, I trust it. And so Holmes probably holds a soft spot in my heart. In terms of a player that put down on paper or predicted on NBC Sports Radio or CBS would be Arian Foster. That was probably the one thing that got me like on the map in some ways because he was a 5th and 6th round pick, and that's probably the biggest call I landed on NBC Sports Radio was Arian Foster will be a top 5 running back, and that was as a fifth or 6th round pick. We had nothing to go on but week 16 and week 17 the year prior, And so that one was a huge land. That got a lot of people championships, and it kind of got my name out there. So, oh my God, this is a bold predicting man. So I'd probably say Arian Foster. He did me the most work, the most solid work.
Hell yes, I will second that. I have the biggest soft spot for Arian Foster for that very same reason. Kind of jumped on him his rookie year going undrafted and got him super late in the draft. But I was following the Texans probably a little bit more closely then, just because they were still a newer franchise to the NFL, just trying to figure out what they were all about. And seeing him at Tennessee, figured, hey, get this guy as a dark horse flyer and kind of see what's going on here. And sure enough, week 1 tears up the Colts for, what was it, $187 and 2 touchdowns, and everyone's going, holy crap, where did this guy come from? And those of us who were paying attention got to bask in that glory for a couple seasons.
I put a lot on the line for that prediction too. Like, I mean, I literally, looking back, I was reckless with how much I put on the line on that one. And so I remember being at a sports bar watching that. I didn't watch the Red Zone then at home. I don't think the Red Zone existed, obviously. So I was watching at a sports bar, and I remember him ripping off, those touchdown runs. And I was just like, I was running around the ball with buddies. So I was like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. Like, can't believe this guy's here. I knew he was going to be here. And yeah, those are good memories. I love Arian Foster. He was such a good fantasy football talent, and not the best player in the world, like physical ability wise. And this is probably one of the things I talk about most when I break down predicting something for a player is it's situation and player talent, and they're one. You can't separate them. You can't separate Trey Lance from being a 49er now. As much as Fields owners will want to be like, well, but he has this. It doesn't matter. Like, he is in a Niner uniform. It is what it is. You can't separate situation from talent. And so with Foster, he had a great situation, the perfect skill set for it. Were there better running backs than him? Yeah. And there, he wasn't the fastest guy in the world, but he was perfect for that system. And identifying that is one thing I love to do, is find the right situation, the combination of player and talent and situation, because that's what makes a good fantasy player.
Zone scheme, Gary Coobs.
Yeah.
So what are some things that you've got working on that folks need to be aware of and need to go and check out there for the coming season?
I'm live every Tuesday and Thursday from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern on my show, the Fantasy Football Show on YouTube. You can find it by going to smitty1.com. Everything I have is at smitty1.com. So if I talk about it, it's there. And eventually it's going to be a Monday through Friday show. I'm hoping sooner than later. So 2 hours a day, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. But I go live like every other night on YouTube. I'm live at least once a day on Instagram. I'm live constantly. So that's not to say I don't go live all the time. I'm mock drafting midnight. I probably go live, I think, more than anybody's ever seen in the industry, because I sit in this cave that I've built here 20 hours a day, just grinding. And my goal is never let anybody outgrind me. And that's kind of what I've done for the 19 years. So find me on smitty1.com and also have text device service, stuff like that. So all of it's right there.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'm super excited to, always enjoy tuning in and watching your show, and I've connected with you on Clubhouse and a couple of places like that before, and always enjoy the takes, and you definitely do have some bold predictions out there, and they seem to come true quite a bit there. So always enjoy getting a chance to hear some of those things and put them to the test for every fantasy season. Hey, guys, let's go ahead and head on over. We got the last team of the week to break down, and that's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But before we get there, we're going to hit up that SportsMe spicy take.
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers will beat the Green Bay Packers again at some point in the playoffs in Lambeau Field. Icing on the cake. Aaron Rodgers is not coming back to Green Bay. He looks to go somewhere else after he loses to Tom Brady again at home.
All right, Derek. Well, you're always forcing us into spicy here. So, a slightly spicy take. I'm not even sure that's spicy, but I'm going to say that the Buccaneers don't repeat as Super Bowl champions. But since I got to make it spicy, I'm going to go with the Buccaneers don't make it back to the Super Bowl.
So some interesting takes there coming through on the old SportsMe spicy take there. Kind of some interesting things that stood out there. There's actually a world where both of those predictions can come true, but that means that you're going to typically see those two teams meet up in like the divisional round type of thing. So definitely an interesting take there. Also some interesting thoughts. That would mean that the Packers will have a better record than the Buccaneers for that first prediction to come through. But let's go ahead and hop on over into the running back room. We're going to start where we always do, the running back room. And they've got this guy, Ronald Jones, finished as running back 16 last year, 192 rush attempts, 978 yards, 7 touchdowns. Caught a few passes there, 28 receptions on 42 targets, 165 yards, 1 touchdown through the air, and just under a 7% target share. Guys, what are your thoughts on Ronald Jones?
You want me to start, or?
I was gonna say, it looks like Kevin's in a tight bid here, so I'll go first here. Ronald Jones was somebody last year that I had, and then I had drafted early Leonard Fournette. That was when he was still with Jacksonville, thinking, hey, I've got a pretty good 1-2 punch here. Two running backs that are going to be starters, and then Fournette comes over to join the Bucs. But Ronald Jones, I stuck with him, and I was very happy that I did. There were some weeks where it was like, is this going to be a Fournette week? Is this going to be a Jones week? It was a little interesting, but overall, Jones was a pretty solid player last year. Missed a couple games. The touchdown numbers were okay. Seven's good, but I would have liked to have seen those go up a little bit, and the 1,000-yard mark would have been nice. But I was a big fan of Ronald Jones last year, and going into this year, it's going to be tough because they do have Fournette, and it's just I don't know that I'm as confident in Ronald Jones this year with the addition of Fournette. I think I'm a little more gun shy towards him, but I don't know that that's exactly the right attitude to take to him.
So I like Ronald Jones in best ball because I don't have to worry about that situation. Now, the good thing is Ronald Jones is going late enough in drafts. You can pick him up as your 3rd or 4th running back, depending on how everything's sitting out, and kind of play that matchup, use him on bye weeks. But he does a lot of good things. And when he gets touches, you saw the success, guys. 20 carries, 111 yards, 17 carries, 106 yards, 23 carries, 113 with 2 touchdowns. He had some very productive weeks, but then he had some weeks where the Bucs rode the hot hand and Fournette kind of got going a little bit, and 7 for 23, 3 for 9, another 7 for 23. And then obviously weeks 15 and 16, he had the injury. And so when you needed him most, right, and this is what scorns fantasy players, right, is when you need him most in your semifinals and finals, the guy's up on the shelf. And that's when the whole playoff Lenny legend started, as then they kind of carried it into that Super Bowl run. So Jones has some explosiveness. He hits the hole quickly. He's got a one cut and go ability that Leonard Fournette just doesn't have. They make a nice 1-2 combo. But I do think Jones is the guy that I would rather have over Leonard Fournette. And I think part of that is that explosive play ability, that if I'm going to roster a guy, kind of those middle rounds for a running back, I want some pop to him. I don't want just 3.5 yards in a cloud of dust. I want a guy that if I'm putting him in bye weeks, injuries, matchup, whatever that is, that has some pop, that, there's the excitement of he hits the hole and 60 yards he's gone. And I get that with Ronald Jones. I don't get that as much with Leonard Fournette.
I have to say that this is a situation I'm not going near. I'm not going to even touch it. I don't care what the ADPs are, because Giovanni Bernard was brought in for a few different reasons. He was brought in to pass catch. He was brought in to pass block. He's got, I think, 5 or 6 times the pass blocking grade of the other two guys. So And I believe they brought him in to fill that receiving role piece of the game, of the offense that it's been lacking. So I don't know. It's a three-headed monster, not a three-headed committee, not a two-headed committee in my view. And, I'd almost take a gamble on Giovanni Bernard versus either one of the other two guys. I just don't trust it at all. There's so many better options to me, and I don't want to be dealing with the headache that will probably you'll probably get from dealing with this situation. But that's my opinion.
Fair enough. I can certainly see that. And you've seen the kind of the fantasy community kind of take a step back there, because Ronald Jones was that guy that everybody was trying to put that, kind of be that darling, that mid-round hero last year for a lot of drafts, where he was the guy that when it got down to the 4th, 5th round, that people were, if he was on the board, they'd smash the button and move on there. And we've seen that where he's now slipping back there a lot of times, farther back towards the 6th, maybe even to the 7th in some of these formats there. And I think there's a lot to be said with that, because of the fact that, he is going to be a guy that can pop and break one loose and score you a big touchdown. But there's also going to be a lot of times where he doesn't really produce for you for fantasy, because last year, when you looked at it, he had to, in order for him to have the really good weeks that he had, he fell into the end zone. And the weeks that he didn't, he was a running back 2 or worse type of situation there. There is some value there this year, just simply from the standpoint when you are drafting him, you could be drafting him as the 4th running back type of thing. But if he's my 3rd running back that I'm going to have to put on my roster, I'm going to pass on that one and not go there.
Hold on, before we move on, I was one of those fantasy football owners that was scrambling last year because they were playing the whole will he or won't he with Ronald Jones in week 16. As we were going into our championship in the good old boys league. And if it weren't for my 2 esteemed co-hosts here, I probably would not have won the fantasy football championship, because you guys gave me, was it Gio Bernard that I picked up that helped me out in week 16?
It very well might have.
Yeah, because Mixon was out, and that matchup was pretty salty for the Bengals.
Is that? I needed Gio to win that title. And now he's a teammate with him.
Yeah, I just think that his involvement that is going to be forced upon. It's going to be a high PPR type role that I think Bernard's going to have, and I just don't see the value in any of them unless you're getting Bernard like really late, because people are drafting Ronald Jones way too high. Like if he was going like extremely late, it depends on what ADP you look at or who you draft with, but I just think there are safer options personally.
And Derek,
I think it's kind of a messy. And you've got Keyshawn Vaughn, who a few beat reporter connections who say they still really like him, and I know he probably won't rise up anytime soon if he ever does. But it's just there's like 4 players that they could potentially go with at this running back spot. I just don't know how it's attractive to touch from a fantasy perspective. I just don't.
It's very New England Patriots of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Carry 4 running backs that could all blow up on any given week.
But the guy that's graded the highest as a pass blocker is Giovanni Bernard. So I'm just saying, if you're going to go this direction, I think he's probably in PPR the guy to bank on.
And that makes a lot of sense, right? Because Rojo had issues with that. That was part of it. Was a couple drops, and the fact that Brady got smashed a couple times fairly early in the season, and he got pissed off at Ronald Jones. And Fournette seemed to do a better job. Now, part of that was also familiarity with the offense, getting past the fact that they didn't have OTAs in training camp, and Brady being more familiar with the system that Bruce wanted to run there. But Smitty, I think you make a great point that
and out of 70
if you make the goat pissed,
and out of 70 running backs, I'm looking at the thing here. 70 running backs graded for pass blocking. Bernard finished as the 7th highest in 2020, and Fournette is 65th, and Ronald Jones 44th. So, they brought you got to think they brought him in for pass blocking, which means he'll be on the field for all the PPR work. And then at what point does he get run, between the tackles too? This is kind of like the Drake and Jacobs debate. Like Drake is probably going to be the PPR guy. He's going to get a lot of the third down work. And then you got to ask yourself, will he also split up a lot of the first and second down work? And if he does, then he's going to get more volume than Jacobs. So, I don't go near Jacobs for similar reasons. I don't touch him.
I'd agree with that. I'm not coming anywhere near Josh Jacobs this season.
Right. Alex, did you have another point that you were bringing up there?
I was just going to say, you talked about last year and how people were in love with Ronald Jones because he was that mid-round darling, and it was attractive because he was the only show in town there. And then when they brought Fournette over, there was a lot of expletives that were thrown in the air, I think, by a lot of fantasy football players that were kind of banking on Rojo being the guy down there.
Yeah. Yeah, but you saw a lot of folks, jump off that ship and probably shouldn't have. But let's go ahead and head on over to Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette finished as the running back 38 last year, 97 rush attempts, 367 yards, 6 touchdowns, 36 receptions on 47 targets, 233 through the air, 0 touchdowns, just under an 8% target share. Guys, your thoughts on Leonard Fournette?
I think kind of like what we were just talking. I think Fournette's probably the guy that gets hurt the worst by Gio coming in, only because so many of his points came in the passing game last season. He didn't do a whole hell of a lot as a runner. I mean, he had five touchdowns on the ground, which is nice, but he had some pretty monster receiving weeks for a Tampa Bay offense that kind of likes to air it out under Bruce Arenas, right? Like 6 receptions, 2 different games, 3 receptions, 4 different games, 4 reception game. You get rid of that, and it goes to Gio, and Fournette just becomes the leftover guy. So he might be the odd man out looking in when it comes to this 2021 season.
Your soccer background was showing a little bit there, Kevin. You said Bruce Arenas.
Oh,
as
sorry.
A combination of Bruce Arians and former U.S. men's national team head coach Bruce Arena.
I apologize.
That's all good. I think with Fournette, I mean, again, he was a very attractive player last year because of, he was going to be the guy in Jacksonville. The only thing they had was this undrafted rookie out of Illinois State that nobody knew anything about unless you listened to our show. And it was going to be just, cakewalk. He's going to be RB1. And then that the trade happened and he moved over to Tampa. And again, as we've all kind of said here, and not to beat a dead horse here, but yeah, of the options in Tampa Bay, like Fournette is maybe the least attractive of them.
And keep in mind, like Damian Williams shined in Super Bowls and then wasn't used the same, that happened. So I think people are going to run with the late production on Fournette and get burned. But I'm not drafting Fournette, not unless he fell to ridiculous value. And I'm just like, who do I take here? It's not going to be a place where I'm targeting him. It'll just be, okay, there's nobody left. I'll take a stab, but nowhere am I drafting Fournette over guys I like, even like a Darnell Mooney. Give me a shot on a breakout player like that versus going with a running back that I've almost zero confidence in that will be a starter for very long, if ever, in 2021. Right.
Yeah, that's kind of the way that I see that one as well. Yeah, somebody already said the point there, so I'm not going to beleaguer it. I'm just going to kind of bring it up again that this feels very New England Patriots-esque, and I believe it was Kevin that said that, where this is going to be a backfield where you don't ultimately know who to start for fantasy, and that's going to drive the fantasy managers absolutely insane out there. Peng's Picks, good friend of the show, saying that he should just go to the Rams or something. That would be an interesting deal there. Guys, any thoughts on Leonard Fournette going to the Rams?
No, we can't take away Hendy's, finally Hendy gets a shot. No, Peng's Picks. We're not doing that.
But
we need Hendy to get a full chance.
I will pose this question. If you're down to it and you're looking at, running back, would you rather go, and I think I know the answer from everybody here, but would you rather go with the younger, an unproven rookie or Leonard Fournette, and you're in that spot?
What rookie?
Take an unproven one. Somebody that's going to be as effective as an RB2. Names are escaping me at the moment.
Michael Carter, absolutely. Get me Michael Carter all day over.
Yeah, but that's not even the same universe. Like Michael Carter's a 5th or 6th round pick, potential high end running back too. Sermon could be a top 10 running back per start, and who knows how many starts he'll get. But
how about this one? Redraft league, and it's Chuba Hubbard or Leonard Fournette.
Chuba Hubbard. Even on the chance he starts 2 games and you get high end Mike Davis like production for 2 games and that's it. You tell me you guarantee me he only plays 2 games. I still take that because I'm not using Fournette. If I'm using Fournette, I've already lost the league. Why have a guy like that in my lineup ever? And Fournette's already squandered away all of his opportunity. There's very little chance he climbs back up into the good graces for the long term at any point, in my view. But they wanted him out of Jacksonville for a reason. He's not a good locker room guy, and honestly, if you make Brady mad enough to where they go and get one of the better pass blocking available players in Bernard, which people don't really realize, they don't realize he's that good at pass blocking. That's like a kiss of death for your long term value. So. Just again, not going anywhere near any of these values. I did wonder if the Bucs were going to draft a big name rookie, and that would have made things very, very interesting, but they didn't. And that I was kind of surprised they didn't grab a good value grab, because a lot of running backs fall in the draft these days. You can get a steal in like the 3rd and 4th round, so it kind of shocked me. But that must mean they like Bernard enough, that they like the idea of Bernard. And to me, that's going to be the only player I look at.
Gotcha. I like it. And it's funny, too, that you mentioned Mike Davis, because Peng's Picks chiming in there asking, what about the Falcons, saying that he can't be worse than Mike Davis? So kind of an interesting thought there.
Mike Davis wasn't bad. We saw the very first chance Mike Davis has really had in his career to make an impact, and he did it. He's not Christian McCaffrey, so him stepping up into that role and someone expecting a top 3 running back finish week in and week out is not realistic. But he stepped in and served very well in a team that, was behind more often than not. Their defense was leaky with Luke Kuechly retiring and Thomas Davis not being there any longer. They had a whole bunch of issues. That receiving core carried the team, and Mike Davis did absolutely everything he could do. And I think he earned the shot from the Falcons. There's a reason he's going in the 6th round. We're not saying he's RB1.
I mean, I don't disagree with Peng's Picks that getting him out and seeing if he could do something somewhere isn't the idea to roll with here. I get it, and I understand it. But yeah, no, I like Mike Davis more than Peng's Picks, obviously. And, that's why we play the game. So it's it's okay to disagree. But Mike Davis, I mean, he's going to probably the best situation for him that he could find, because Atlanta's not running anybody in making anybody like 1,100, 1,200 yard rusher. They're looking for a running back that's going to be heavily involved in both the rushing and passing game kind of equally. Somebody that's got a good nose for the end zone. Mike Davis does. Somebody that can be ultra efficient. And I know his yards per carry were low, but it was a tough situation. Like you said, getting handed Christian McCaffrey type volume when he's not Christian McCaffrey. No running back can really just jump right into that. And he did a darn good job doing it. And he was really, really good for a string of games. And then he slowed down, and then everybody's judging him on, the sum total of work versus the amount of time he was doing really good when he's prepared. When you come in like that, you're not getting the practice reps. You're not getting the conditioning and the work as if you're going to be starting running back. So he wasn't fully prepared to come out and play the amount of time he did play. So I think to do as well as he did in the beginning showed enough to me that, hey, this guy, if he comes in prepared as a starter, could probably handle the workload a little bit better. I like Mike Davis. I think he's a pretty darn good, late 5th, early 6th round pick. A really good running back, 2, if you want to go super light at running back 2 and go, let's say you draft McCaffrey, ironically, at 1, and you go, DK Metcalf and AJ Brown at the turn picks in 2 and 3, and then you surprise people and take CeeDee Lamb because he fell for some reason still in that league, and you haven't even gone running back 2 yet. You're waiting forever to go running back 2, and you take Mike Davis and Michael Carter and platoon a running back 2 with those two guys. I'm fine with that. Like I don't want Fournette coming over to mess with that. So I'm gonna,
awesome.
I'm gonna deny that one too. Payne's pick. Sorry.
Alrighty. Well, guys, we've hit up both Gio Bernard and Keyshawn Vaughn a little bit here as we've gone through. Do we have any thoughts that the listeners need to know about on that we haven't already talked about with either Gio or Keyshawn?
Nope.
Alrighty, let's go ahead and head on over into the wide receiver room. Mike Evans is over there. Wide receiver number 10 finished last year, 79 receptions, 109 targets, 1,006 yards, 13 touchdowns, just under an 18% target share. Guys, your thoughts on Mike Evans?
I have liked Mike Evans for a long time. I like his frame. I like the fact that he's, 230 pounds and 6'5" and has a wingspan as long as a tractor trailer. Like I like a lot of what Mike Evans brings to the table. I don't want him as my wide receiver 1, even though that's where he finished. Right. I think that 10 touchdowns might be a little bit tough for him to repeat just because there's so many mouths to feed in Tampa Bay. But there comes a point where there's parts of each offense that as a fantasy player, you'd like to have a part of. And this receiving core for Tampa Bay is that. So if you want a piece of that and Mike Evans happens to fall into your lap, and if you pass on him, you don't think you're going to get Godwin on the next turn or whatever that looks like, there's nothing wrong with grabbing a Mike Evans. Again, big body guy, likes to high point the ball. Brady obviously trusts him for those 50-50 shots. He feeds him the ball, at that almost 18% clip for as far as target share goes. So he's a guy that he's going to be able to see volume even with the other mouths in town. And he might be, I think he has the safest floor out of all the receivers in Tampa Bay, but he might actually have the lowest ceiling. Just because he's not as explosive in kind of this new format of Tampa Bay as opposed to when he was with Jameis Winston.
Yeah, I had shares of Mike Evans last year, and it was pretty nice actually to have him on your team. And Kevin, to your point, when one of the strategies that I like to employ is just to get a piece of an offense. If I like the offense, to try and find a piece of it. Well, it turns out I was taking a lot of pieces of Tampa Bay last year. One of them unbeknownst to me at the time when I was grabbing Leonard Fournette up. But I think with Mike Evans, obviously the chemistry that him and Tom built up without the benefit of a training camp, of a preseason, that was kind of a surprise, I think. I mean, we all know how good of a quarterback Tom Brady is, but to see that he kind of latched on to Mike Evans and wasn't afraid to put the ball his direction. There were some feast weeks, there were some famine weeks, but I was pleased with his overall production. I have no reason, I guess. The only concern is the one that you brought up, Kevin, and that there are plenty of mouths to feed. But when you have plenty of mouths to feed and a first ballot Hall of Famer at quarterback, it's a lot easier to swallow that pill.
Yeah, I think also, 7 straight 1,000-yard seasons, like he's the definition of consistency, plays hurt all the time, which isn't, a great thing, I guess, but it's great that he's never missing games for you. But I don't know. I really do like Mike Evans in 2021, mainly because this is one of the only handcuff situations you can find wide receiver in fantasy football that makes a lot of sense. Mostly you're handcuffing running backs, but if you handcuff Antonio Brown to Evans or Godwin, but let's specifically talk Evans here, you're pretty much locking yourself into a wide receiver 1 production for 17 straight weeks. Because I think if Evans were to go down, Antonio Brown would absolutely step into high wide receiver 2 type value, and you can get Antonio Brown late. So this is one of the unique wide receiver handcuffs in fantasy. And Evans, to me, I don't know. I see Brady building, he didn't have good rapport with anybody right away. And if people remember, it was like there was some tough times early on for the Bucs, and people weren't, thinking this was the team like they were at the end of the year. They were thinking, oh, okay, everybody's kind of banged up. Brady couldn't get everybody healthy at once. And even though Mike Evans he plays banged up. There was times. What was that game? Didn't he have one reception and two receptions, like 2 touchdowns or whatever the heck it was?
Yeah, week 6 and 7, he went 2-1 and 2 for 2.
So I mean, like Evans did a lot being hurt for a big part of the year. So I'd say he at least duplicates his receptions and yardage. So give me like 75 receptions for like 1,100 extra game. So give me 1,100 to 1,150 with 75, 80 receptions with the extra game, and give me easily 10 TDs. And I say with Antonio Brown, I feel ultra confident in those numbers, because if I'm wrong and he gets hurt, Antonio Brown's gonna make it up for me. So I kind of like, if you're gonna go, let's say running back, which I'm all about going best player available. I don't go in with a set plan. I hate when people are like, Smitty, what should I do? What should I go running back in round 1 and 2? I never, ever tell somebody yes. I tell somebody you have to go with the flow. I'm always best player available. Best player available may lead me down the road of running back. It may lead me down the road of running back, wide receiver, quarterback, and then my platoon of running backs at running back 2. But if you're going to go, let's use the 1 pick again, McCaffrey, and let's say you go Clyde Edwards-Helaire and J.K. Dobbins. Now you're looking at a place where Evans might fall to you at your next pick, at your 4th round pick, and he's probably the most ideal wide receiver 1 you could find in that scenario where you have yet to go wide receiver. And then you take Antonio Brown, boom, like, add a Galladay. You have a pretty cool looking team going running back.
Absolutely. Well, too, and when you look at it over the back half of the season, right, when Tampa Bay really had their 3 wide receivers there, Mike Evans got better than he did when, before Antonio Brown was there, and when Chris Godwin was banged up in the first part of the season. Because over the first part of the season, you saw a lot of games that we already kind of talked about where, he had 4 targets, 2 targets. He wasn't a volume type of receiver like you would typically expect a wide receiver 1 to be, and really stayed fantasy relevant on a lot of those things because he had 1 catch for a touchdown or 2 catches for a touchdown. And he ended weeks that way, where over the back half there, as the season really started going through there and that offense started clicking, you started seeing him jump up there where he was consistently getting 9 to 7, 9, 12 types of targets a game. And you saw that production flow with it as well. And I think that back half of the model is more what we're going to see over the 2021 season than the season as a whole. So those Bucs are that offense kind of clicked, and I think you're going to see that continue as the season progresses into 2021, to the point where we'll see Mike Evans. I'm going to see him probably right about where he finished last year, kind of at that fringe wide receiver 1 territory. And again, for where he's being drafted, that's some pretty good value there, because right now he's coming off the board at wide receiver 13.
And this was a team we have to remember. Yes, they won the Super Bowl, but they were 7-5 going into their bye week in week 13, and then they figured it out and didn't lose a game since. Is a team that desperately needed a preseason and OTAs and a training camp, and that's what we saw the first 12 weeks of the season essentially play out in front of us, was OTAs, training camp, and preseason right there, playing out in real time. And then they figured it out in that bye week, and I imagine Tom had a come to Jesus moment with a lot of them, and then they performed very well after
imagine that. So imagine with the rapport of the whole year behind them, the Super Bowl, that when they have, I think Evans could easily have, like I would say I wouldn't be shocked if he had a 1,200 yard, 13 TD, 80 reception season. I really wouldn't.
Yeah, I could see that happening. All right, let's go ahead and talk about Chris Godwin, who finished as wide receiver 32, 65 receptions, 84 targets, 840 yards, 7 touchdowns, just under a 14% target share, and definitely not the thought everybody had on what Chris Godwin was going to do in this offense coming in after that season finish in 2019 of wide receiver 2. But guys, what are your thoughts here on Chris Godwin?
Godwin's the guy that I'm targeting because I can get him I get him at a little bit more of a value. So Godwin missed 4 games last year. Part of it was a calf, and I think the other was a quad, if I'm not mistaken. And I very well
have
could
the
be.
hand injury.
Maybe it was a hand.
I think it was.
Okay. Oh, was it the finger? He broke the finger and had to get the pin put in, and then Fournette or Rojo had the same thing happen when late in the season. Okay.
Yes, the will he or won't he?
Yes. Okay. Anyway, so Godwin's the guy that I like because when he was playing, his target share was actually healthier than what Mike Evans was seeing. So Mike Evans had, 3 or 4 different games of 4 targets or less. Godwin had one of those in games where he played and was actually on the field. Other than that, he was seeing a consistent share of 6 to 8 targets a game. Didn't get in the end zone as much as Mike Evans, but he's not 6'5". He's only 6'1". He was a guy who's kind of controlling the middle of the field a little bit more than Mike Evans was. He's not the 50-50 ball guy that Mike Evans is either. He's more of a, quick slant and go, deep ins, deep outs type thing. But I like the fact that while everybody was healthy, Godwin saw more targets than Mike Evans did. And when it comes to taking that value piece, I feel like touchdowns are so freaking unpredictable, right? Like we can think we have a beat on touchdowns, but there's very few guys that you can, bank on 10 plus. Like that's a high number for NFL receivers, 10
so
plus.
Your life is on the line though. 17 games. Does Evans have 10 or more touchdowns or under 10?
I think the probability of him going 10 or higher is greater than 10 or less because Tom Brady's the quarterback. But I hate guaranteeing double-digit touchdowns for anybody. Like that's your realm, right? And I get that. You are Mr. Bold Prediction, and I will gladly listen to your advice on that. But that's where I kind of shy away. Is the only guy in the NFL that I'm telling you I guarantee will have double-digit predictions is Devontae Adams. Outside of that, I think everybody's up in the air.
Yeah, I mean, injury could definitely take him out, but that's where the handcuff comes in. And I think the handcuff can be moved right over to this scenario, too. But to your point, I think he was on pace for like 90 receptions. I believe it was like about 1,200 yards and about 9 TDs. If you extrapolate the 12 games over 17, because we have the extra game now. So he would have been on a pace for 90, 1,200, and 9. So it comes down to injury risk for me with Godwin, because I know he didn't miss any time his first 2 seasons, but has that feel to be a guy that's going to be kind of banged up. And if you get Antonio Brown, you're covered. That's a way to, I think, get your 1,100 yards, your 10 TDs, and your 80 to 90 receptions is having Godwin and Antonio Brown. And I'm not asking anybody to start both of them at the same time, but I think you will know if Godwin's in or out in enough time to use Antonio Brown or not use Antonio Brown. And in 17 games, you will have those stats, and Tom Brady will have more rapport with all those wide receivers, like Alex said. So I think Godwin, Evans, you can't really go wrong with either. And in the scenario I painted earlier, where you go McCaffrey, Clyde, J.K. Dobbins, I'm fine with Godwin being the number 1 wide receiver or Mike Evans being the number 1 wide receiver in that scenario. And I actually was faced with that dilemma in a league where I went running back like that. And then I had Godwin and Evans in a back-to-back situation. And I was like, why not? Like it felt weird. It could burn you if the Bucs have a bad game. But, I think Godwin's got a lot of upside. He just has a touch more. Even though Evans is always banged up too, he seems to play. And I just like asked you that question, life on the line, will he get more than 10 TDs? I think even if Evans missed 4 games, he could still somehow find a way to get 10 TDs. He's such a crazy TD monster. And he's had, I think, only 2 seasons of his 7 where he was under 8 touchdowns. So I feel like Tom Brady's just, I could just see it now. There's going to be at least 2 games where Evans has at least 2 or 3 touchdowns in one game. It's just the kind of guy that Evans is.
Love it. So we got a question coming in, and we'll just get the one-word answer. It's from Samuel Jacobwitz. Who do you think will be better this year, Darrell Henderson or Galladay? It is a PPR format, 10-man standard ESPN roster.
That's a tough one because you got Galladay, who's already banged up again, but had so much potential. Like, I bet you every one of us had Galladay in our top 12 wide receivers this time last year. And I mean, he's got a decent quarterback situation. Barkley, if he's healthy, which is a whole nother debate. And everybody's getting riled up on my live earlier today because of my Barkley talk. If you guys want to go there, I could definitely go there. But Galladay, I mean, that's the thing. If he's healthy, he's going to ball out. I think he's going to have at least a wide receiver 2 type season from a fantasy perspective. Henderson could be a top 10 running back, or McVay could screw him like he did in the past. And McVay is so unpredictable as running backs. Is really hard. Even if you think, okay, well, who's the competition? Xavier Jones could be the guy. And they could bring in Love Bell. You know, we're still far away from week 1. Who knows what's going to happen? I do believe Henderson's probably in the best spot to get the volume because McVay does tend to go with a player that knows the system a little better, even when they bring a rookie in. Look how long it took Akers to get in there. He kept getting hurt. Akers was a huge avoid for me all offseason because of what I experienced with Henderson. I had big, bold predictions for Henderson, probably one of my bigger running back misses from the past. And it's because it was all based on his talent, not looking. I should have been looking more at McVay, although we didn't have a whole lot of track record of being inconsistent with running backs because Gurley had such a long reign. So I don't know how much you could have predicted it, but McVay has been so unpredictable with his running back usage. Even when Henderson had a real opportunity to start his rookie year, you had Malcolm Brown and Gurley both hurt in the same week. Probably shouldn't have played either one, but he's kept rotating which injured running back he put in and then take away from Henderson's opportunity. But Henderson walks in knowing the system, walks in as the veteran. Even if they brought out somebody from the outside in, I feel like he would lean on Henderson a little more. And I'm really hoping Henderson has a season that I really hoped he'd have back his rookie year, and he proves me right. Although Galladay's a tough player to pass on with all the uncertainties. So I'm going to leave this one to you guys. It's I'm very torn on it.
For no reasons other than personal ones, Galladay, because he spent his freshman year at North Dakota.
Makes sense.
I would be jumping all over Kenny Galladay if he didn't just injure his hamstring at camp. Like, that already worries me a little bit. I thought his injury last year may not have been as severe as led on. I thought it was a professional decision through the end of that season, not wanting to go out and sacrifice his payday more than anything. But now seeing that tweaked his hammy already, those soft tissue injuries scare the crap out of me, especially for receivers this early. They just seem to linger. And that being said, I'm still going Kenny Galladay because the one thing that Daniel Jones does is throw the deep ball really well. Like, when he's given time and isn't planted on his backside, because his offensive line, was 4th worst in the league last year. So when Daniel Jones is giving time, he actually has a very good deep ball. And Kenny Galladay is a great high point receiver. We saw it time and time again with Detroit. And the connection that him and Matthew Stafford were able to make. And Galladay was finishing top 12 on like 67 receptions because he'd high point the ball, he'd fall in the end zone twice, and oh shit, there you go. He has 12 touchdowns, 67 receptions, and he finishes as wide receiver 11. Like, that was his 2019. And that was part of the reason we thought 2020 was going to be so great, is they were going to build upon that rapport, and it just didn't happen. So the Giants are going to be trailing. I don't see them as a front running team this season. So I think that it's going to force Daniel Jones to air it out. And when in doubt and they need 6 points, they're going to be looking for him in the end zone because they hate Evan Ingram. And the rest of these guys are, 6'1" and have arms like crocodiles.
So for me, I'll be the different voice in the room. I'll probably go Darrell Henderson on this one. A couple of reasons, right? It's a PPR format, and you're talking a 10-man type of deal. Well, the way that that's being drafted, Kenny Golladay is gonna be down there a little bit, but I can also probably get Darrell Henderson in that format as my fourth or maybe even my fifth running back in that situation.
But when has Matt Stafford ever throwing to a running back?
He actually does it a fair bit, but what I'm saying is where I'm going with this one is the fact that Kenny Golladay is the big play guy and is touchdown dependent a little bit, right? We look at the season in 2019. It came down to that finish being a double-digit touchdown finish to it. He had 65 receptions on for over 1,000 yards. So he's a big play kind of guy, which will fit well there. But the fact that it's PPR format, 65 receptions isn't necessarily going to blow my socks back there. I'll take what I'm going to perceive as a little bit more consistent workload out of Darrell Henderson.
Yeah, I'd probably lean Henderson, but I like both. And if somebody asked me on either side of this, like let's say the two same people came to me, like, should I trade Golladay for Henderson? Same guy, so I'd probably tell them both. Like, if it fills the need, it's a pretty even swap. And I don't mind either side. I want to lean Hendy, and the reason I took myself out of the voting here was because of my bias for wanting to eventually be proven right on my Darrell Henderson call so many years ago. This guy, Darrell Henderson, coming out of college, was number one in college football history since they did stat collection in yards per attempt. Like in more 20 and 40 plus yard runs, I believe, than anybody in the nation that entire year or the last few years. Like I know he came out of Memphis and he had vanilla defenses, everybody talking about competition, but he came out with some of the most jaw-dropping statistical advantages over the other running backs in the class. Like, this has been a botched, type of situation for a long time for Henderson. And I just hope he gets a shot. I fear McVay truly screwing this one up. The only thing that makes me think he can't is that he's the veteran. Like, he's the one, and McVay proved with Malcolm Brown that he would lean on him. And so I think he's going to lean on Henderson no matter what happens early on. And if Hendy can stay healthy, he did really well last year in some spots. Like, he looked really good. And if he can stay healthy, Henderson's going to have a big year, but we'll see.
Awesome.
Wait,
and
before we move on from this, do Samuel and Jason know each other? Are they leading us on here? Or is this actually a coincidence?
There you go. There's your answer. Wow, Jason, that's an insane coincidence. Who would have thought 4 random dudes? It's random dudes.
No way. I don't buy it.
Oh.
I don't buy it for a second. I think these two dudes are in the same league trying to one up each other on their draft or their.
You're not a conspiracy theorist. That's me, not you. Get out of here.
So, see, and Samuel even says definitely not. So, Jason, Samuel, hopefully that answered your questions and you got some different viewpoints and you can make your own decision based on the cases presented there. So let's go ahead and we're going to hop on over to the next wide receiver, and that's Antonio Brown. We've talked a little bit about him, but through half of the season last year, wide receiver 55, 45 receptions, 61 targets, 483 yards, 4 touchdowns, 10% target share. Guys, your thoughts on Antonio Brown?
As I said earlier, I really like the idea of cuffing him to Evans or Godwin. He's the only cuff I can think of at wide receiver that makes sense for that in fantasy football, but it's a fantastic approach. And if you don't own either of Godwin or Evans, I still like the idea of grabbing him as a bench wide receiver that you won't use until the opportunity presents itself, but walking into a week where he's starting. And if anybody thinks that Godwin and Evans can't miss the same game, they haven't been watching those two guys over the last 2 years, because they can be banged up at the exact same time. And, I wouldn't put it past those guys to miss the same game together 1 or 2 times during the year. I could see Antonio Brown being the only healthy wide receiver of the 3 for like 2 games. I can envision it now. And if you own them, you're going to get big numbers for those 2 games. So it's kind of like that Chuba Hubbard example. You asked me, would I rather have this, or guarantee me only 2 starts from Antonio Brown? I would take that over, other commodities that you may never use all year.
Yeah, I like Antonio Brown. I like the lure of saying I have Antonio Brown on my roster. He's another guy who's fun. Like, he's a fun guy to have on your fantasy team. And, the Smitty, I don't know that I had thought about the wide receiver handcuff aspect until you brought it up here. But listen, you talk through that, like, I can completely subscribe to that. Like, it makes a ton of sense. And, trying to think of any other comparable situation, and the only one that I can think of that might come close is if Cooper or CeeDee Lamb goes down and you have Michael Gallup. Like, that might be the only other one. But regardless, Antonio Brown, you're getting at a discount. Antonio Brown, you're getting in, the 9th round, even later in some drafts, because guys are taking flyers on young rookies and they want to see what Denzel Mims is going to do, or Elijah Moore. Like, Antonio Brown makes sense, especially in redrafts. Like, I don't need the mysterious rookie upside in the 9th necessarily. Like, give me a guy on a high passing volume team that the quarterback likes. Like, it's no secret Tom Brady likes Antonio Brown, and right, wrong, or indifferent, that personal friendship and admiration, game respect game type deal, Brady's going to find a way to keep AB happy. Like, there's no doubt about it. And I love quarterbacks in the second year of in Bruce's offense. So I see no reason that I would shy away from Antonio Brown. If he's going to be my 4th wide receiver, you plug and play, you see what the matchup is, you fill him in if one of the top 2 guys gets dinged up, but all things lead to fantasy production. And that's what you need for bench players when you have to slide them into your starting lineup.
I apologize, guys. I'm going to have about a 4-minute hard stop. I've been live literally since like 9 a.m. So I'm going to have nobody out there outside the studio waiting for me if I don't jump in 4. So any other quick topics we can talk about? And I don't mean to jump on you in the middle of this, but one thing I wanted to ask was we're on the Giants, and I know this is a Tampa Bay show, but this is kind of how my mind works. I just, what kind of pops up and what I think people might want to hear based on the conversations we've had. But Barkley, are you guys on the Barkley train right now based on the news that came out today? Because my thinking is this, and I've been cranking this out on my content for a while, is Barkley's not near 100% right now. And just because he was activated from the PUP list, a lot of people are taking that, and you especially see it in the analyst, level. They're taking that and running with it, saying, okay, he's back in my top 3 or 4. Him being activated from the PUP doesn't indicate anything other than, okay, he's going to start taking hits. They want to see where he's at. He seems far further behind than he should be, given how early he tore his ACL. And as much as I want to back Barkley, as much as I want to believe in him, and I feel like people are approaching this without any caution at all. And you're talking about a guy that I think should be ranked around a 12, 13, or 14 overall value, where you've got Hill, you've got Diggs and Adams already gone. You have Zeke gone. You have all the other running backs gone. That's where Barkley feels safe to me. It's not that I'm fading Barkley. People hear what they want to hear when I come at them with this content, and they go, "Oh, you're fading Barkley. You're gonna be wrong. You're gonna be sorry." And I'm not, because if Barkley does bring what a lot of believers think he can bring to the table, Adams is still going to bring that. Like, and you're avoiding all of the risk that's involved with it. Until Barkley with an ACL tear, or in the case of Mike Thomas, I told everyone to stay away from Mike Thomas until we knew exactly what was going on. The moment that injury news broke, or the moment surgery news broke, where he had surgery, and people didn't know what that meant yet because it got clarified later, but everybody was like, he had surgery. Okay, he's back. He's Mike Thomas is back. Everybody blindly wanting to believe without any factual information at all. We're like, this guy's back. He's going to be a top 5 wide receiver again. What surgery did he have? He had 5 damaged ligaments. Did he have the deltoid surgery that he needed before, right when it happened, and he practiced on it, played on it all offseason? And maybe like your car having bad alignment, what did you do? What damage did you do trying to literally work out on this damaged deltoid ligament? And then when news broke that he had just had the surgery, all the people reacting without any kind of factual information at all got burned again. And so Barkley, you have no positive information whatsoever other than that he got activated from the PUP list. Before that, it's all been negative. It's all been, he doesn't know where he's at, doesn't know if he's going to be ready for week 1. It's not that he can't deliver or be a top 5 running back at the end of the year. He could. But until a player proves that they're back and ready, and they've got to prove it to you to earn a 4th round pick, in my opinion, coming off that injury. It's not a safe place to go at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 overall. What do you guys think of that?
Well,
I completely subscribe. I completely subscribe to that. I got into a fight. Like, and I guess I shouldn't say fight, but I got into a pretty interesting argument on this show when we were covering the New York Giants, because I said clear as day, Saquon Barkley is not a top 5 running back. And our guest did not care for that, and so it was one of those. It was one of the most
show was so funny.
interesting moments of our show, because the whole theme of the show changed on that one statement. Like, I instantly became public enemy number 1, but a lot of those same things. He hadn't shown anything back, and this was 2 months ago when we covered the Giants. I mean, this was
May, I think, is
so
all the way back then. So.
But very much for the same reasons. No positive news. I still don't like the offensive line. We still don't know how he's actually going to cut and how his leg is going to respond from recovering from ACL injury. The Giants are not going to be a front-running team. There's a whole bunch of different reasons why I don't like Saquon this year as a fantasy performer. If I'm drafting a guy in the first round, my first-round picks are safe. I do not gamble with my first-round pick, because history has shown us that you cannot win your league in the first round, but you can damn sure lose it in the first round by taking a bust. And for me, I'm staying away from that. I am risk adverse in the first round. And so Saquon's off the table. I will take Nick Chubb, Aaron Jones,
and you can go
Zeke all the way up.
You can go Adams or Hill, or I love Diggs. Take Diggs and then take Antonio Gibson as your running back 1, or Harris, or whoever you like. Aaron Jones can fall there too. But I like Gibson more than I like Saquon right now. And that's going to ruffle feathers. People are going to get upset. Name calling.
CEH better than I like Saquon.
Yeah, name calling ensues after that at that point. But it's blind. Everybody's blind. And I'm not saying, and Alex, I don't know what your stance is. And if you love Barkley, like, I'm not saying you're blind. But I'm saying,
I am. Alex, you're freaking blind.
It's not. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say the belief that Mike Thomas would be okay was absolutely blind. The people saying that Cortland Sutton is going to be way better than Judy this year, he's the alpha. Like, it's as if they don't even know he tore his ACL. I don't know if anybody's seen the footage of Cortland Sutton running routes with a knee brace, but he does not look anywhere near 100% yet. He could get there. We still got another month. It might take him a month to get going. Like, he can get there. I'm not saying that Sutton can't become the guy he once was, but I feel like there's so many people without any information on this injury stuff. And I pride myself on a lot of the injury coverage that I do. And I will admit, I actually like Barkley at 4 or 5 in January, February. And I talk a lot about it on my show, but I'm one person that does not dig their heels in. If I get new information, I get a different feel, I'll hit my people right away and be like, look, I got an update on how I'm feeling about this guy. Barkley went from 4 or 5 overall down to now at the turn. And I still feel uneasy about it because I like Antonio Gibson better. Like, if push comes to shove, I wonder what I'll do at 13 overall if it's Gibson and Barkley. I really do. And like you said, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, people can laugh at that all they want right now. Clyde's going to blow up in 2021. I firmly believe that. New offensive line. The fact that he didn't learn how to pass protect, he couldn't with the pandemic. And this guy's going to have a big year. He can't get game scripted out anymore. He's going to be a part of that wide receiver, a part of that passing attack when they do go pass heavy. And I think they want to run a ton more too. They just couldn't last year with a broken offensive line. But back on point, I feel like Barkley, if Barkley ends up being a top 5 running back at the end of the year, I will lose zero sleep over it. I will feel badly about it this much, 0%, because my advice is safe. My advice still gives you potentially the same amount of points. It gives you safety, and it's also the right decision until you know that he's back, because this could be the Mike Thomas situation. We could find out in a month that, hey, there's a reason why it's taken so long. Is anybody asking that question? Why is the most athletic man in the universe not ahead of schedule when he tore his ACL in week 2? Why is he still unsure about week 1? No one's asking that question. I'm not saying he needs a second surgery or that a cleanup job needs to happen, but it wouldn't shock me. Like, I don't know what is taking him so long when he's got, like, and I explained this on my show all offseason. When you tear your ACL is responsible for keeping that knee joint tight. And when you tear that ACL, you essentially have some looseness in the knee, because that's why it gives out when you walk. And so you have your LCL here, your MCL here, and your ACL. Saquon Barkley and players like him have so much surrounding muscle around their knee that none of us have. Like, our knees are probably bony. He's got muscle wrapped knees. And Garrison Hurst, if any of you know who that is, or I know I'm an old dog here, but Garrison Hurst didn't have an ACL when he entered the NFL. He walked into the NFL draft process. They did a test on his knee, and they said, "You don't have an ACL," and he had no clue. He had no clue. They tracked it back to a high school game where he tore it, and it's because his thigh strength was so strong and his surrounding muscles around his knee were so strong. He didn't even need an ACL. His knee was completely tight. The joint was tight as can be. Saquon Barkley is the same type of setup with his quads and muscle strength that he literally, you could have walked in probably at night. The ACL fairy could have taken his ACL out of his leg, and he wouldn't have noticed the next morning if it was done precisely, because the man had such a strong knee and tight joint. He could have done what Garrison Hurst did.
So I offer two things here. Two things that I agree with what you're saying here, Smitty. I do. But I think that of the potential first round picks, Saquon is definitely the biggest wild card and the highest risk that you will take. But I offer two things. One, he's 24 years old. The body responds a little bit better when you're 24 than it does if you're 34. And two, the Giants know that this is their cash cow. They know that this is their guy, and maybe being a little bit more cautious with him is the best way to go about things.
Well, and the other thing, too, to keep in mind there is he didn't have surgery right away. They waited, I want to say they waited a month to 2 months after that injury before the surgery happened, if I'm remembering that correctly, which would have set the timeline further back, by 4 to 8 weeks, somewhere in that range there, because the surgery didn't happen right away. So that's something to kind of keep in mind there too. But, Smitty, you brought up that you saw him around there 12, 13, 14. That's actually where I've got him ranked going in. This was number 12. It took a Cam Akers going down for him to get into the top 12 for me.
And that's fine. That's an okay range. I just can't believe people are taking the PUP news. Is kind of my point. Maybe I get too amped up about it, and people think I'm by my tone that I'm saying avoid him at all costs, and I'm not. I like him at that range right there. But people are taking this PUP news. He got lifted up as if, okay, we're in the clear. He's back, and it's such a blind reaction. That's kind of more of my point. And Alex, to your point, they do need to be cautious with him, and that is an excellent point. But that also could be 3 or 4 weeks of him not being the same player. And that's, again, why people need to package in the 12, 13, 14 overall value. And then your other point was good. What was it?
He's 24 years old.
Oh, that's a good point. But also it is getting to that age, I believe it's 25, where you can't look at ACL tears the same though. So he's actually right on the verge of that time frame where it is not optimal anymore. He is slightly under it, but it is a big difference to be coming from the college game with a torn ACL. No big deal. Priest Holmes, a lot of players came out with torn ACLs. You wouldn't even know. You're like, really? They tore their ACL in college? Dalvin Cook, a lot of guys have had torn ACLs that come back completely 100. But right around, I believe it's 25, it's not the same, and it's a lot harder. Jamal Charles would be the exception to the rule, but he also is a very light guy. You could look at his frame being part of the reason for that. Barkley's very heavy. The other thing I'll say on the injury front, and then I got to run, is why are running backs not lasting long anymore in the NFL? There's a lot of factors at play, but part of it is everyone's bigger, they're stronger. Your ligaments don't grow. Your ligaments do not grow. And when you have as much torque and muscle involved as Saquon Barkley does with his leg muscles and everything, you are putting your ligaments at, they're stressing those ligaments out more than other people were in the past. So that's one factor. And I've had doctors on to talk about that kind of stuff. And it's interesting because no one really has an answer. They can't say, oh, it's because of this. Is it because defensive players are bigger, stronger? Is it because running backs are bigger, stronger? Are they taking harder cuts? Is there more torque on the ACL? No one really knows, but it's got to be a combination of all those things. And so for those reasons, I also worry about a guy coming back like Saquon, because you will compensate. If he's not 100% ready, his body will have to compensate in order to do the things that he's trying to do on the field if he's not ready. And that will lead to other injuries, just like the alignment of a vehicle. Like I said, if it's off, it's going to create other problems. He will tear his hamstring, which is often accompanied by an ACL tear that next year. There's always like a hamstring issue. And so if he's not 100 on point, and he's not, because he said he doesn't know where he's at, I worry that if he does rush it and get on the field, there will be another injury. So that's kind of my stance on Barkley. It's not popular, I can tell you that right now, but that's kind of how I feel.
Well, Smitty, we know that you got to run. We appreciate you coming on and taking the time. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you. Real quick before you go, let's make sure that the listeners know where to connect with you.
I appreciate it, guys. It's been fun. Smitty1.com. You can find me on YouTube every Tuesday and Thursday from 5 p.m. Eastern to 7 p.m. It eventually will be a Monday through Friday, 2-hour-a-day show. And you can, you'll find me live all the time. So, and sometime I'll have you guys on my show. Probably a little bit more toward, the middle part of the season, because I got a lot of things booked up on it, but I would love to have you guys on sometime and reciprocate. So I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you. And you're welcome back anytime. Just hit us up. Let us know.
Okay.
Thanks, Smitty.
Guys.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.
All righty, guys. So big shout out to Smitty for coming on and helping us break down some teams and going through that. Yeah, if you haven't done so, hop over there, Smitty1.com. You can connect with him there, be able to subscribe and to the YouTubes and all of those good things there. Thanks, Smitty. Let's go ahead and hop back over into the tight end room. We got Rob Gronkowski there, tight end number 8. 45 receptions, 77 targets, 623 yards, 7 touchdowns, under a 13% target share. Guys, your thoughts on the Gronk?
I think Gronk is a great tight end value this year, honestly. Like, he's being forgotten. Guys are falling in love with Irv Smith Jr. and what the Patriots are doing between Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry and Bobby Tonyan, who got all of his production off of seemingly like 36 catches. And I know that's not the exact number, but just to prove a point here, like, Gronk still has it, and Brady still loves Gronk, and he is a great red zone asset. There are some games where he's just scripted in a bit more, but as far as tight ends go, if you're waiting on tight end, pick up Gronk. Please pick up Gronk. Like, he is absolutely in my game plan for 2021. As if I'm waiting on tight end, I plan on picking up Gronk, and I have Gerald Everett from the Seahawks is another guy that I have my eye on super late, because I can stack my team out with running backs and wide receivers and then fill it in with tight end. And if I really hate the matchup, I can drop Everett and pick up someone else. But I'm keeping Gronk because the value is there, and he's a great piece of Tampa Bay's offense for a Tom Brady security blanket.
The only thing that scares me about him is his health. And will he, I hate to use the cliche, but your greatest ability is availability. And will he maintain availability throughout the course of a season? That is the gamble that you have to take when you take Gronk. But with where Gronk is going and where you can pick him up, it's not that big of a risk to take because you can stream tight end and you can work your way around having a different person in that tight end spot week in and week out, especially if you're waiting on tight end that late in your draft. But yeah, I like him, but I am not sure that I will be targeting him.
Well, Kevin and I can fight that one out then, and we'll go ahead and battle each other for who gets to have the Gronk on their squad. Gronk is a guy that I'm absolutely going after. And because of the way that I tend to construct my teams is a lot of that reason, because right now he is a guy going very late. You're talking right around that pick 100 mark to it. So he's right around that 9 to 10 range, which about the earliest that I'll start really looking for tight ends. And this is a guy that, so outside of your top 4 tight ends, right? When you're talking, Kelsey, Kittle, Waller, Andrews, type of thing. Outside of those guys, tight ends start becoming very touchdown dependent. Well, why not take a touchdown dependent tight end if you're going that route? Rob Gronkowski's got the best connection with probably any tight end to their quarterback of anybody in the league right now, right? Like we've seen that. He came out of retirement.
I think baby Gronks might be better, but
maybe, but to the point where he came out of retirement to play with Tom Brady. That's what I'm trying to say. The chemistry is absolutely there to the point where if you're going to get a touchdown dependent tight end, you might as well take a guy that catches a lot of touchdowns from the quarterback. And I'm subscribing to the same method that Kevin's talking about there, where I may actually go a little bit more of a wild card there and put 3 tight ends on my roster, just depending upon if it's a deeper bench. But typically it's going to be a guy like a Gronk, a guy like Gerald Everett, and then I'm probably trying to shoot the shot on either Blake Jarwin or Adam Troutman down there in those deep double-digit rounds there, just because I like the way that comes to play, and that is one of the ways that you can set that up and start streaming the position there. Any other thoughts on Gronk? All righty. OJ Howard last year, injury-shortened season, was one that we had some higher expectations coming into last year. That didn't happen. Let's go ahead and talk about OJ Howard. Any thoughts for him for Fantasy 2021?
He's going to have to prove it to me before I roster him anywhere.
He's a streaming option, and even then, he may not be your first option when you're looking at streaming.
Fair. Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's one of those that I'm just going to let him be there. He'll be a guy that will easily be on the waiver wire after the drafts, and we'll see what happens with that one and go from there. But was not a draftable player for me. Quarterback room, Tom Brady showing up there, proving that he still got it. Quarterback number 8, 401 completions, 610 attempts, 65.7% completion percentage, 4,633 yards, 40 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Did a little bit of work on the ground, really just putting up about 3 touchdowns there on the ground. Guys, your thoughts on Tom Brady?
50 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 5,000 yards passing this season.
Okay, so that would put him a little higher than what I have him ranked at QB 9.
Yes.
Just a touch higher than that. And you know what's crazy, Kevin? I don't think you're like, I don't think that's as bold of a take as like it might, appear on its surface. For the whatever he is, 44 now, 43, 44-year-old. I will say that I think that what we saw last year is a good barometer for what he can be, because he still figured it out. Yes, they were 7-5, but they figured it out towards the back half of the year. But statistically, and there were a few games that were stinkers, but statistically, I don't think he was that different from weeks 1 through 12 as he was weeks 14 through the Super Bowl. So I think, consistency is what Tom Brady's game is. And I could totally see a 50 touchdown, 5,000 yard season, but I'm more inclined to think that we're probably closer to what he had last year than that.
Yeah, Kevin, I thought I was incredibly bullish on Tom Brady this year. And I had to go back through and pull up my projections and where I statted him out. And turns out I'm not quite as bullish as you are on him, because I've got him just under 5,000 yards, 4,900 and some change, but I've only got him right around 43 touchdowns there. I also see him as about finishing that QB number 5 overall there. So Alex, yes, you are nowhere near as bullish as Kevin and I, but turns out I'm not quite as bullish on it as Kevin, it sounds like.
No, the more I think about this and the more I'm looking into it, the more I truly believe it, because just off the sheer numbers, right? And I know what I said earlier about it's hard to predict touchdowns, but is it not realistic to think that Mike Evans and Chris Godwin both have 10 touchdowns? Gronk and Antonio Brown each have 8 touchdowns. And then you have Tyler Johnson and Scotty Miller, who are going to plug in for probably 3 touchdowns apiece. So that puts us at about 40. And then you have your running backs.
42 by my rough math.
About 40.
8 between the running backs. Yeah.
And roughly, or a wide receiver that we're not necessarily thinking of, or maybe Mike Evans does get to 13 like Smitty was saying, right? And that puts you like none of those numbers individually, if you lay that out in front of anybody, does this sound realistic for this player? Yeah, that sounds realistic. Does this sound realistic? Yeah, well, guys, that's 50 touchdowns. Like in 17 games, 50 touchdowns for a pass-heavy offense led by arguably the greatest quarterback of all time. I just don't see why this isn't, extremely likely.
I don't think that he plays 17 games.
How dare you?
And not because he gets hurt, but I think because he takes week 18 off, because they will have locked up their playoff spot already.
There's only one bye now. Remember, they don't do buys for the
exactly, which is why I think that they lock up their playoff spot, right?
So
they're either in the bye or no. I think look, you're either in the playoffs or you're not. I don't know that they're going to be contending for that number 1 seed. And even if they are, I don't think it comes down to week 18.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. I don't know, dude. I can see them. Alex, I think you're right. I think he probably sits week 18 there. I don't know that they're going to be that
a fantasy week anyway. I don't give a shit.
Right?
It's not. It isn't. It isn't. It means nothing for our purposes. But
actually, that does bode some fantasy relevance there, because if we're saying that, hey, we don't think he's going to start week 18 against Carolina, that means that what Kevin's laying out there, and which I'm not far off from Kevin there either, means that those weeks are going to be more productive when he is playing, because that will be spread out over a, it won't have a as large of a spreading out. It'll be a smaller concentration there. So yeah,
and
absolutely.
I totally buy into what Kevin's saying. Like I'm right there with you. I think that is in the realm of possibility.
Absolutely. So guys, any other thoughts on Tom Brady? Any other thoughts on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
Lots of fun fantasy pieces, especially in the passing game. The running game, buyer beware. Like I said, I don't know that I like any of them for redraft. I think best ball is where I like Rojo the best. And Smitty had a good point. If you're in a really deep league, take a flyer on Gio. I mean, worst case scenario, right? They decide to do something crazy, and whether it's trade fodder or you end up having to play him one random week or whatever. But lots of fun fantasy pieces. This is a fun team.
So that's what I would say. Yeah, the running back room is approach with caution. The wide receiver room, get what you can when you can, because it probably won't be around for very long. And then obviously with Tom, it's Tom.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. Great takes, guys. Appreciate, we are putting all of these, we're chopping up a lot of these player profile videos, all of these things, and we're putting them into little like 3 to 5 minute videos that you can watch, and you can get our thoughts a little bit more condensed on these players, so that you guys are able to prep for those drafts going in. But the place that you're going to find them is over on the YouTube channel. Make sure that you hop over there, click the subscribe button, click the little bell button. We are putting out those videos. We've got like one a day coming out, I think, the rest of this month, to really get you guys prepped and ready to go for your draft. So you don't want to miss that. Guys, we've got a little bit here. We're going to save some of our actual tier breakdowns for next week, but I do want to lay some of the groundwork there for, how we talk about some of the tier-based strategy, right? That's something that we talk about a fair bit here on some of the tiers and how that goes. And so kind of just lay the groundwork here for what we're going to talk about next week, which next week is heavily draft strategy. If you've got questions on how to draft strategy, make sure you tune in next week. But guys, when you're talking tier-based type of drafting, like, why do you see that as being important?
So I'll start because Kevin's probably going to speak a little bit more eloquently about other position groups. But really where this started for me and really looking at it was with tight ends. And maybe because it's the easiest one, it's low-hanging fruit, where there are such clear tier breaks when it comes to tight ends, and it's starting to become a little muddier within that. But for when I'm looking at a tight end, it is, will I get Travis Kelce or will I get somebody else? that to me is where the tiers are. Now it's a little different in running back and wide receiver rooms because there's more players and there's better chance for points out of those position groups. But tier based never really came onto my radar really until we started doing the show. But with tight ends, that was kind of the big eye opener for me, was how did we look at tight ends and how was it affecting my thought process when I went into a draft with who I'm targeting at what spot.
So I like the tier-based approach because it reminds you to take the fandom out of it, right? Like if I'm looking at this group of players, I believe that this group of players all have about the same potential to do X. And X is a variable, right? We learned that in basic, algebra. X is the variable, but I believe that all players have the ability to do X, and there's different tiers. I set up my tiers maybe a little bit differently than these guys do. Even like, my top tier is, these are the guys that I think can finish number 1 overall. That is tier 1. If I don't think you can finish number 1 overall at your position, you are not in tier 1. You move down, and then it kind of jumps into different areas like that. But mainly the tier-based system is to take the fandom out of it, that it doesn't matter whether it's Matt Ryan, Matt Stafford, Ben Roethlisberger, or Andy Dalton, just names, right? If I believe that all of these players can do X essentially, well, now you're in the same tier. So now I'm not pissed and I'm not panicking in a draft if Derek takes the top guy in my tier and Alex takes the second guy in my tier. And if it's a position of need for me, right, I'm not panicking. Like, it's like, okay, you can have player A, you can have player B. And if it comes to me, I can go player C, or I can pivot to a different position group that maybe I feel like has more success overall, right? Not just positional tier groupings, but overall tier groupings. So there's some of that layered within it, but it helps me know, when do I pivot? When do I follow the run? When am I okay being at the back end of a run? It's not always the fun thing to do. Like they tell you, don't chase. Well, if you truly believe that 3 to 5 players make up a tier in my mind, if you're at player 4 or 5 and the back end of that tier, you believe that they can finish where the first one was, or even their ceiling might be one tier up from that. You should still be comfortable with that. So I like the tier-based drafting. I do it a lot. I have what I would consider a very proven successful track record. Excuse me. It's late. Sorry.
Yeah.
Track record with that. So that's why I believe in it, and that's why I pump it so much during our program here.
I will add to that, and Kevin brings up a good point. It is, we're all football fans, right? We got into the sport, and we've met a few people doing this show, but we got into this sport because we were fans of a certain team, right? And we always, we might look at guys on that team with rose-colored glasses. Fantasy football does not care who you're a fan of. It is a scientific-based approach, as scientific as you can get with trying to predict the future. And it's a more scientific-based approach to constructing your team. So I don't always adhere to it. I will have a strategy in mind, and I will have players in mind. But I feel like if I did adhere to it, I probably would be able to flaunt as many trophies as my two co-hosts.
So, yeah, the tier base will definitely help you get some more cash and trophies there, using our show's tagline there. But Kevin and I definitely do our tier bases a little bit different, right? Like we were talking a little bit before the show, and Kevin sets his up like on the tier 1 guys, like he sets them up as far as where he sees them finishing number 1 overall. And I'm not far off from that, but I do it from a little bit different standpoint on how he does that. When I'm setting up my tiers, I do it based on, so I project out, just about every player, almost imaginable that's going to have any fantasy relevance there, and go team by team and go through all of those things. And when I'm setting up my tiers, I look at it because you'll see, from a statistical standpoint, you'll see clusters start to happen of total point output there. And so, while I may not have the same number of guys in there, or I may have a little bit deeper tier or something like that. That's just because of how that statistical cluster fell for me, where I will see, between, the 6th guy and the 10th guy, total ranking, like that might be a tier for me. And each one of those guys may break down to the point where I see a 1 or 2 point per game basis difference there. So you'll see these guys where, a lucky, one more touchdown can change the trajectory for those guys. And then, so that's kind of how I base that, even though English might be really tough right there. And I kind of base that throughout and go through it that way, where I'm doing it based on where these statistical clusters and these outliers are going to play at, which it leads kind of back into that point that Kevin was making, where you are going to get these guys that are ultimately going to finish kind of right around one another, which allows you to look at your draft and go, okay, cool. I see these set of running backs are going to finish in this kind of tier-based deal, which means that I'm going to get roughly this kind of expected out point per game type of thing. These wide receivers are here, and it allows me to even kind of stack these tiers up a little bit against that and go through it, because even when you're going through your tiers, while you may have running back tier 1 and a wide receiver tier 1 and a quarterback tier 1 and a tight end tier 1, doesn't mean that, just because all my guys out of my wide receiver tier 1 is drafted, I need to go to my tight end tier or, pivot that way. It allows you to stay a little bit more balanced when you're drafting, and really look at long-term projections and really balance your team, so that you're not just drafting you're able to have that strategy throughout and draft a balanced team that'll allow you to win those cash and trophies.
Yeah, it's a good thing. Trajectories and track records is not our tagline.
Yes, although it might have to be. Alrighty, well, guys,
so I'm looking forward to next week. It's probably my favorite show that we do all season long. Is getting into the draft and kind of explaining my method. The method behind my madness and hearing what you guys have to say and what people think about it. But this is the show that you don't want to miss, right? The team breakdowns are fun. Quite honestly, they're tough. Like, it's not necessarily the easiest thing for 32 consecutive weeks breaking down a team, and not all teams are all that fun to, cover and content wise, sometimes it's a struggle. But the drafting, where you set the foundation for your fantasy success, this is what makes my heart happy. Like, this is what does it for me when it comes to fantasy football. So I am super stoked for the show next week already.
Absolutely. We do have a bunch of great shows coming up here to close out the month, right? We're going to talk we're going to go heavily into our tier-based systems through all of through the different positionals there. We're going to get into some of those strategies, right? Like when you're talking a running back heavy, zero RB, what those things look like, what those really mean. Yeah. The following week, we're going to finish out our tier-based. We're going to get into some DFS stuff. We haven't really done that a ton, but we're going to bring up some DFS stuff. We've got a very awesome guest coming on to help walk with us on that one that knows a ton about it. And then we're going to get into some other like auction drafts, strategies, draft values there to close out the month there. So we've got a ton of great content coming your way. Make sure that you hop on over there to all the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Good Old Boys FF. Subscribe there, follow us. Any final thoughts for the listeners, guys?
Stay tuned. There's still lots of news and notes coming out. And if you have questions, ask. There's lots of drafts firing off right now as we start the redraft season. So let us know what you're thinking. Obviously, Dynasty is still in effect as far as trades go, but this is when the season gets really fun, guys. Like, a lot of people don't follow it as closely as we do. That's why we're more than happy to provide content about this year round. But now, even the novice and intermediate fantasy owner and fantasy player, they're starting to get the itch now too. Like, this is when it really starts to get fun. So stay tuned, ask lots of questions, and we're here to help.
I forgot to mention this right off the top of the show, but did either of you two watch the preseason game, the Hall of Fame game?
Abso-freaking-lutely.
While I was fixing a sink.
I didn't grab a second of it, mostly because I'm in Cowboys territory now, and I didn't feel like watching that anyways. But the wonderful television show Hard Knocks, as we record this, debuted tonight, and I'm going to find my way to being able to watch it because it's surrounding the Dallas Cowboys this year, and I'm very interested to see how old number 4 looks week in and week out here in preseason.
Yeah.
Over or under on how long it takes Egan to become a Cowboys fan?
6 weeks.
It'll never happen.
6 weeks.
I'll take the over. I was going to say at least another year, but
nah, it can never happen. I have too many.
They're
too many
so
people
fun
that
to
I
watch,
know.
though. They're so polarizing and fun to watch.
That's fair, but I know too many people that are Cowboys fans that I have too much fun giving crap to, so I can't, in good conscience, having made those jokes in the past, celebrate
the Cowboys
celebrate America's
was my
team.
mom's team. Like, that's how I got hooked on football. Honestly, it wasn't my dad. It was my mom talking about the Dallas Cowboys and watching those games, and that's kind of who I grew up.
I mean, who didn't love watching Emmitt Smith and Troy Aikman just light everybody up?
Right. Like I remember getting to stay up late for the Monday night
Yep.
football games, being in second and third grade, and my parents would let me stay up late and watch those
Michael
football
Irvin,
games.
watching all those guys.
Hell
they were
yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Mommy,
Shame they
why is
haven't
his
really
nose-
done anything since then.
So, guys, I think that's going to wrap up yet another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Make sure you hit us up on the socials. Do not miss the opportunity now to go to YouTube. Do it. Go ahead and head on over there. Click the subscribe button, ring the bell. We have a ton of content coming to you. We've also got the rankings posted on the website, goodoldboysff.com. For Kevin and Alex, I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe.